The first feeling inside that house is not fear. It is hesitation. It is the strange, quiet pause that comes before fear has a name. A person steps through the door and immediately slows down, even if they do not mean to. The air seems still, in a way that does not feel natural. It does not feel empty. It feels occupied by something softer than sound and heavier than silence. The rooms do not greet you. They wait. The walls do not seem old in a charming way. They seem watchful. Every floorboard looks as if it remembers wait, and every doorway feels slightly narrower than it should. What unsettles people most is how quickly they begin to listen. Not to voices, not to footsteps, to absence. They listen for the thing that should be there and is not. In most homes, even old ones, there is some harmless movement. A vent shifts, a pipe answers the weather, a window settles into its frame. But here, the silence does not behave like normal silence. It gathers. It stretches. It makes the smallest motion feel improper. A hand on a banister becomes too loud. A coat brushing a doorway seems almost rude. People begin to move carefully, not because anyone told them to, but because the house seems to demand that kind of respect. There is also the feeling of being too visible. It comes on in certain rooms more than others. A person can stand alone and still have the private, uneasy sense that their posture matters, that even the turn of their head is being noticed. Visitors often try to act normally at first. They smile, they make some small remark. Then the smile fades for no clear reason. Their voices soften without planning to. They stop standing in the middle of rooms. They drift toward edges. They keep an open path to the door. Even those who arrive expecting a thrill, expecting fun, seem to lose interest in performance once they are fully inside. The house has a way of making people feel embarrassed by noise. The staircase adds to that feeling. It rises in a way that should look graceful, but it does not. It looks patient. From below, the upper floor does not invite curiosity. It creates pressure. People look up at it and imagine someone already there, not moving, simply aware. Nothing has to happen for that sensation to begin. The architecture does enough. The turn of the railing, the long upward line, the dim landing, the sense that the second floor is not merely above you, but already involved in your presence. Many homes have staircases. Very few make people feel as if they are being observed from the top before they even place a foot on the first step. And then there is the smell, faint and shifting, never strong enough to explain. Old wood, dry plaster, cooled fabric, dust touched by weather. At moments, the scent seems ordinary, then something changes and it turns personal, almost intimate, as if the house has come too close. People struggle to describe this part because it is not one smell and not constant. It comes and goes with the kind of timing that unsettles memory. A visitor might notice it in a front room, forget it completely, then catch it again near a bedroom and feel a small shock, as if the same thought has followed them up the stairs. Outside, the house sits among ordinary life, which only makes it worse. The street is real. Lawns need mowing. Cars pass. People collect mail. The daylight touches the siding like it touches every other home. Yet even from the sidewalk, the building can feel separate from the rest of the block, as if it belongs to a slower hour than the surrounding town. People passing by sometimes look toward it and then away too fast. Some do not look at all. The house does not need darkness to be unsettling. In daylight, it seems exposed and still unreadable. At dusk, it becomes harder to place in the present. The windows begin to reflect the street, and the reflections make the inside seem deeper than it is. In a small city, habits form quietly. People learn where they feel comfortable and where they do not. They learn which porch welcomes conversation, and which yard seems to shorten it. They learn which house can be passed without thought, and which one changes the pace of a walk. This house does that. People crossing nearby may keep to the other side of the street without discussing it. A driver may glance once, then stare ahead. A child may ask a question and receive an answer that is too quick to feel complete. Over time, those small choices build a reputation stronger than any story. The building begins to live in behavior. Before it lives in language, only later does the setting come fully into view. This is Mitchell, Indiana, a quiet southern Indiana city where a house on West Warren Street has had many years to gather attention without ever needing to ask for it. It stands with the dignity of an old residence and the unease of a place that has never become ordinary again. Today, it is widely known as the Whispers Estate, a name that sounds almost delicate until you stand near the front door and understand how badly a soft sound can disturb a person. The name fits because the house does not feel loud, it feels close. By the time someone hears the name, they have usually already felt the thing the name is trying to describe. Not words, not a clear voice, just that intimate pressure near the ear. The sense that silence has narrowed and moved nearer to the body. Some people respond by talking more. Others stop speaking almost completely. You can often tell how the house affects a person by what they do with their hands. They fold their arms. They touch the back of their neck. They keep one hand near the rail. They check their phone even when there is no message. They behave like people waiting for ordinary reality to return and finding that it returns too slowly. There are houses that frighten because they look damaged. There are houses that frighten because they are visibly abandoned. This one is more difficult than that. It still looks like a home. That is part of the problem. The curtains, the rooms, the shape of the stairs, the neatness of the front, all of it suggests warmth and shelter, the simple order of domestic life. But once inside, that promise weakens. The idea of home does not quite hold. Instead, another feeling rises. Not danger exactly, not even panic. Just a deep and growing conviction that many private moments have collected here and never fully left, and that a visitor has entered too late to separate themselves from them. Some places feel haunted by stories. This place feels burdened by routine, by evenings that did not end well, by nights of poor sleep, by small acts of listening in hallways, by doors closed a little too softly, by people pretending not to be afraid so that others would remain calm. That is why the house stays with people. It does not shock them once and release them. It follows them home in fragments, a pause before bed, a glance toward a dark landing, the decision to leave a closet door open, the sudden dislike of hearing one's own breathing in a quiet room. Long before anyone begins asking what happened in that house, the harder question is already there. Why does it feel as if something human is still trying not to disturb the rest of the house? When the history is finally told, it does not arrive as one clean story. It comes in records, retellings, local memory, and small disagreements that never quite settle. The earliest discovered records place the house in 1894. It was first associated with Dr. George White and Sarah White, the original owners. A few years later, either in 1899 or 1901, depending on which is followed, the property passed to Dr. John Gibbons and his wife Jessie. Even this uncertainty matters because it gives the house a familiar kind of tension. The details are close, but not fixed. The home enters the historical record already carrying a slight blur around its edges. Dr. John Gibbons was remembered as a respected town doctor, and his work was not kept apart from domestic life. He saw patients in rooms on the first floor of the house. This means that from early on, the building was not only a private residence, it was also a place of waiting, diagnosis, pain, hope, bad news, and the quiet endurance that follows both sickness and injury. The Gibbonses were also said to have adopted orphaned or abandoned children. That detail changes the emotional shape of the house. It was not simply a doctor's home. It was a place where family and illness, care and fear, childhood and grief were forced to exist under one roof with very little distance between them. One story from that family has lasted longer than almost any other. It concerns a 10-year-old girl named Rachel, sometimes written Rachel, one of the Gibbons children. Public accounts describe a fire in the front parlor around Christmas of 1912. The usual version says she was near gifts and an open flame, and that the accident left her badly burned. She died 2 days later in an upstairs bedroom. The basic. Facts are repeated often because they are hard to shake. A child, a front room, a holiday season. 2 days of suffering inside the same house that had already failed to protect her once. In towns like Mitchell, stories become heavy when they are simple enough to remember and sad enough to repeat without embellishment. Another death followed, in family memory. A 10-month-old infant named Elizabeth is said to have died in the master bedroom of unknown causes. Then Jessie Gibbons herself reportedly died in that same room after suffering from double pneumonia. 3 losses tied not to open fields or distant hospitals, but to the rooms of daily life. A parlor, a bedroom, another bedroom. Once those things happen, a house changes in ways that cannot be measured by repair. A family still cooks, still cleans, still opens curtains in the morning, but ordinary movement is no longer ordinary. A parent standing in a doorway has to remember who last stood there in pain. A staircase becomes a route between the living and the dying. Even a closed door begins to mean too much. For a documentary, the temptation is to rush toward the strange reports that later made the house famous. But the more disturbing truth may be simpler. A town doctor worked downstairs while sorrow gathered upstairs. Patients came and went. Children moved through hallways already touched by illness. The front rooms had to remain presentable even after terrible things had happened inside them. That kind of split can mark a home for generations. It teaches everyone in it to behave in 2 ways at once. Calm on the outside, alert on the inside. Many houses hold grief. Fewer are built to continue functioning so publicly while grief is still fresh in the next room. Later accounts suggest that the pattern did not end with the Gibbons family. Public summaries of the property's history mention a man who died in the upstairs bathroom sometime in the 1950s or 1960s. They also mention a young boy who died after falling down the front staircase. Names from those later years are harder to pin down in public material, which is often the case with local tragedies. What remains is the shape of reaction. People remembered where in the house things happened. They remembered the bathroom. They remembered the stairs. They remembered enough to keep speaking carefully when the address came up. A house does not need a complete archive to develop a fearful reputation. It only needs repeated sorrow in rooms people can still point to. It is easy to imagine how those years would have felt from the inside. A later tenant bathing a child upstairs, pausing whenever the pipes went still, a husband taking too long, in the bathroom, and a wife waiting outside the door with rising irritation that turns, in a second, into dread. A mother hearing a fall from the staircase and knowing, before she reaches the bottom, that the sound was too heavy to be harmless. Old houses make sharp sounds. Everyone knows that. But when injury has happened more than once, each sound begins to arrive carrying memory. A slip is no longer just a slip. A cough at night is no longer only a cough. Each small event enters, a room already prepared for fear. By the time the house had spent years in changing hands, vacant stretches, and declining condition, it had become more than an address. In 2006, according to the house's own public history, a previous owner bought it after a period of vacancy and began restoring it. During that process, reports of strange experiences increased, and the property gained the name Whispers Estate, after guests repeatedly said they heard whispering close to their ears. Whatever a person believes about that, the timing matters. Restoration often exposes more than wood and plaster. It pulls open sealed spaces. It releases smells, dust, light, and memory. It asks a building to relive itself while strangers walk through it, paying attention. That may be why the history of this house feels more disturbing than dramatic. It is not built on one single event. It is built on accumulation. A doctor's work in the home, a child burned in the parlor, and a infant dead in a bedroom, a wife dying in the same room. Later losses tied to the bathroom and the staircase. Vacancy, repair, new people entering with cameras and expectations. The building keeps forcing the same problem on every generation. People come looking for one answer, one clear explanation, one moment that started it all. But the house does not offer that comfort. It offers a long record of human beings trying to live normally in rooms that had already become difficult to survive. Over time, what unsettled people most was not one event, but repetition. Different years, different owners, different reasons for being there, yet the same behaviors kept appearing. People chose downstairs rooms even when upstairs ones were better. They left hall lights on in daylight. They avoided turning their backs to open staircases. They checked bedroom doors more than once before sleeping. Even those who laughed at local rumors often ended up making the same small choices by nightfall. That is how a place gains power over a town. Not through proof, but through imitation. One person's fear looks silly until another person, who has never met them, begins acting in the exact same way. Neighbors noticed patterns too. Some learned not to stand chatting at the front walk after dark. Some kept their children from cutting across the yard, even when it would save time. Some said very little in public, but gave private warnings to renters, repairmen, or relatives visiting from out of town. The warnings were rarely dramatic. They were more disturbing because of how plain they sounded. Do not stay upstairs if you can help it. Do not let children play on the stairs. If something wakes you, do not go looking around the house half asleep. Those are not the words of people describing a legend for fun. They are the words of people trying to pass along habits that once mattered to someone. In houses with long histories, rumor often grows larger than reality. But at Whisper's estate, the rumor stayed close to daily life. People did not speak about impossible things as much as they spoke about restlessness, discomfort, bad sleep, changing moods, strange tension between family members, and the sense that the house made small problems worse. An argument begun in the kitchen somehow returned on the landing. A child who was normally calm became stubborn only in one bedroom. A visitor who had intended to stay all weekend left after one night and gave a weak excuse about work. These are not dramatic incidents, but they are the kind that linger because they repeat without ever becoming clear enough to dismiss. The stories connected to the upstairs bathroom and the staircase deepened that pattern. Accounts mention a man dying in the upstairs bathroom in the middle decades of the 20th century, and a young boy later dying after a fall on the front staircase. Once such stories enter local memory, the house changes for every later resident. The bathroom becomes a room people enter with a faster heartbeat than they admit. The stairs become something to watch rather than use. Children are called by their full names there. Adults keep one hand on the rail even when carrying nothing. In places marked by loss, caution can survive longer than memory itself. People forget the exact year. They do not forget where to be careful. One of the most unsettling stories told quietly in Mitchell is about a woman who rented rooms there for a short period long after the earliest family tragedies. Her name is not always remembered the same way, which is how local stories drift, but her behavior is remembered with uncomfortable clarity. She arrived practical and tired, a woman trying to begin again after a failed marriage. She brought her young son, some boxed dishes, 2 lamps, and a wooden crate of books. Neighbors saw her cleaning the porch and hanging laundry. For the first week, nothing seemed wrong. Then people noticed she was sleeping in her clothes. She began sitting outside near dawn with both hands around a cold cup of coffee, staring toward the street as if waiting for someone to collect her. A few days later, a neighbor asked if she was settling in. The woman smiled, but she did not answer at once. She said only that the house did not like being asleep. It was such an odd sentence that the neighbor laughed before realizing she was serious. After that, the woman began keeping her son downstairs, even in the afternoon. She stopped letting him use the front steps. When she did go upstairs, she moved quickly and came back holding too many things at once, as if she wanted one trip instead of two. One evening, a passerby saw the child standing at the bottom of the staircase, crying without sound, one hand raised toward the landing and no adult in sight. The final night came in winter. The woman left before sunrise. Her car was packed, badly, with a blanket hanging from the trunk and a lamp base visible under a coat. The front door was still open when a neighbor noticed she was gone. Inside, the downstairs looked abandoned in the middle of a normal evening. A saucepan sat on the stove. A chair had fallen sideways. One of the child's shoes was near the first stair. She later told someone at a gas station outside town that her son had started answering someone who called to him from upstairs, always in a low voice, always when she was in the kitchen and could not hear the words clearly. She did not wait to find out who he thought was speaking. Whether every detail of that story is accurate no longer matters. What matters is that people believe it because it sounds like the house. It matches the emotional record already attached to the place. Whispers, stares, lack of sleep. The feeling that the building begins by making people attentive and ends by making them exhausted. That is the real pattern. Not a spectacle. Attrition, the slow draining of certainty. The way a person begins by doubting the house and ends by doubting themselves. Did I hear that? Did I leave that door like that? Did my child really say that? Did I just imagine the sound of someone on the landing? Fear grows best in homes where every question can still sound reasonable. Years of vacancy only made the stories worse. Empty houses attract weather, animals, trespassers, and talk. Windows darken, paint fades, grass rises. People driving by fill the silence with whatever they already believe. During those vacant periods, the estate seems to have settled deeper into the town's imagination. It became the house someone pointed out to a friend, the house teenagers dared each other to approach but did not touch, the house older residents could describe room by room without needing to have been inside for years. Once a place reaches that stage, it no longer depends on current events. It survives in behavior, in warning, in the extra beat of quiet that falls whenever its name is mentioned too casually. What is most disturbing is how little these stories change from decade to decade. Different people arrive with different expectations. They bring religion, skepticism, humor, cameras, bravado, fatigue. Yet the same reduction takes place. They lower their voices. They become careful on the stairs. They listen at doors. They sleep badly. They leave early. In that sense, the house does not need to frighten everyone in the same way. It only needs to make each person slightly less certain than they were before entering. Over a long enough span of years, that is more powerful than panic. Panic fades, but the memory of becoming a quieter, more watchful version of yourself in a particular house can stay for the rest of your life. In modern times, the house is no longer hidden by neglect or silence alone. It is known. Its address is public. Its rooms have been photographed. Its name travels far beyond Mitchell, Indiana. Yet this has not made it ordinary. If anything, attention has made the contrast sharper. The structure is maintained. The front presents itself clearly. Visitors can arrive on purpose, not by accident. But stepping onto the property still creates the same change in posture it always seems to have created. The body understands something before belief catches up. Shoulders tighten. Conversation thins. People who came to be amused find themselves speaking gently, as if entering a hospital corridor late at night. The house also exists now in a strange double role. It is both local residents' history and public destination. Some come because they are curious about old buildings. Some come because they know the name Whispers Estate from television, online clips, or lists of unsettling places in America. Some come wanting proof of something unseen. Others come wanting to prove that nothing unusual can affect them. By morning, those motives matter less. People rarely leave in the same mood they arrived with. It is not always terror. Often, it is something quieter and harder to describe. They seem disappointed in noise, eager for daylight, and slightly ashamed of how relieved they are to stand outside. Even official city attention has had an oddly practical tone, which only deepens the unease. In 2020, the House received renewed approval from the Mitchell Board of Zoning Appeals to continue operating as a haunted attraction after a change in ownership from Van Reiner to Richard Ballard. Public reporting noted that neighbors were largely supportive, that improvements had been made to the property, that operating hours could not increase, and that outside noise, including screaming visitors, had to be controlled. Ballard said he kept tours small, often 6 people, because too many people made it hard to hear or experience anything. It is a very modern kind of document: zoning, curfew, cleanup, good neighbor policy. Yet beneath it sits the old reality that a house in a residential street requires special rules because too many people come hoping to endure a night there. That mix of normal management and lingering fear shapes the neighborhood today. Locals may not all agree on what the house means, but many still behave around it in ways that reveal more than they say. Dog walkers shorten the leash near the property line. Children on bicycles grow louder as they approach, then strangely quiet as they pass. Delivery drivers complete their task quickly and do not linger on the porch to check a message. Even those who speak warmly about the owners, and there are neighbors who do, sometimes tell their stories while looking not at the house, but at the ground, as if the place is easier to discuss when it is not directly in view. People in small cities also learn to separate courtesy from comfort. A neighbor can appreciate improvements to a property and still dislike the feeling of living beside it after dark. A city board can approve operations and still insist that screaming be kept down, trash be removed, and hours remain controlled. A house can become a local business without ever fully becoming a local normality. That is the state whispers estate, occupies now. It stands within civic rules, within tourism, within schedules and reservations, yet it keeps slipping past those categories. The old emotional response survives every modern layer placed over it. Paint does not change that. Better lighting does not change that. Public recognition does not change that. Visitors often arrive prepared with theories. They speak about air pressure, suggestion, age, grief, expectation, performance. All of those things may matter, but what stays with many of them is not a theory. It is one small, personal moment. A sudden wish not to go upstairs alone. A strange reluctance to close a bedroom door. The feeling that a hallway is shorter when crossed in daylight than at midnight. The urge to keep checking a landing that appears empty every time. These moments are difficult to argue with because they belong entirely to the person who felt them. No camera has to confirm them. No one else even has to notice. The house works best, if that is the word, when the experience stays private. Locals, who would never spend a night there, still know the shape of the place in their minds. They know the front staircase. They know the old doctor connection. They know the child fire story, whether they believe it fully or not. They know enough to tell an out-of-town friend where it is and then add some small instruction that sounds casual but is not casual at all. Do not go there tired. Do not take children if you can avoid it. Do not joke too much once you get inside. These are not official warnings. They are social traces left by decades of unease. A town does not keep repeating such advice unless something about the place has remained unresolved in ordinary life. The most unsettling thing about the house today is that nothing forces a final answer. The building is not sealed away. It can be visited, it can be described. People have tried for years to turn it into a solved thing, whether by belief or by disbelief. But the emotional effect stays loose, beyond neat conclusion. It remains possible to leave and say nothing happened, while still admitting that you would not want to sleep there alone. It remains possible to mock the stories, while also walking a little faster to your car. It remains possible to call the house a business, an attraction, an old property with a sad history, and still feel that these words do not fully account for the way the upstairs seems to wait. That is why the house continues to disturb people. Not because it proves anything, not because it offers answers, because it does the opposite. It leaves people with behavior instead of certainty, with caution instead of explanation, with memory instead of evidence. A person drives away from West Warren Street and enters the ordinary rhythm of Mitchell again. Streetlights, porches, stores, quiet roads. The world resumes its shape. But later, often much later, another thought returns. In a home where so many people have listened for something they could not name, maybe the worst part is not what they thought they heard. Maybe the worst part is how quickly they learned to listen for it.